immigration enforcement need to see your documents.
I'm an American veteran, 22 years Army.
I didn't ask about the Army. Documents.
My wallet's right here. Let me show you.
Hands where I can see them. Don't move.
The intersection of service and suspicion in America has always been a study in contradictions. The uniform that earns salutes on one street becoming invisible on another. The credentials that open doors in certain rooms meaning nothing in the wrong parking lot at the wrong hour. On March 14, 2024, at a Shell station on the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Crenshaw in South Los Angeles, a 22-year Army veteran named Harold Raymond Washington, 54, a retired master sergeant with 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart, learned what so many black men in uniform have learned before him, that the ID card in his wallet, the veteran's cap on his head, and the service record that should have earned him the benefit of every doubt meant nothing to Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent Derek Morrison. Morrison would spend 47 minutes detaining Washington at gunpoint, ignoring his military ID, his VA employment badge, and his driver's license. What Morrison did not anticipate was the intervention of Terrence "Ghost" Williams, 34, a documented member of the Rollin 60s neighborhood Crips who would step out of that same Shell station, recognize the injustice unfolding before him, and do something that would save Harold Washington from unlawful arrest, cost the federal government $4.2 million, and force a congressional hearing on ICE enforcement practices. The morning arrived in South Los Angeles with a marine layer hanging low, the temperature at 58 degrees at 6:15 a.m. The Shell station at MLK and Crenshaw had been a neighborhood fixture for 31 years, less a gas station than a community crossroads where church mothers bought coffee before sunrise services and construction workers filled thermoses. The station sat at the heart of a neighborhood that was 67% black and 24% Hispanic according to the 2020 census, yet had seen 3 ICE operations in the previous 14 months despite immigration enforcement's stated focus on areas with high concentrations of undocumented populations. The station had 11 security cameras covering every angle of the lot, a surveillance system installed after a robbery in 2019. A system that would capture every second of what was about to happen with perfect clarity. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? Drop your cities in the comments and hit subscribe so we can keep telling stories like this one. Harold Raymond Washington was born on July 11, 1969, at Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital, less than 4 miles from where he would be detained 54 years later. The third of 5 children born to Raymond Washington Sr., a sanitation worker for the city of Los Angeles for 34 years, and Dorothy Washington, a home health aide who worked in that profession for 28 years, Harold grew up in a 3-bedroom bungalow on West 59th Street that remained in his family's possession to this day. He attended 59th Street Elementary, John Muir Middle School, and Crenshaw High School, where he graduated in 1987 with a 3.4 GPA. On September 3, 1987, at age 18, he enlisted in the United States Army, following in the footsteps of 2 uncles who had served in Vietnam. Over 22 years, Master Sergeant Harold Washington served in Operation Desert Storm, 3 deployments to Iraq between 2003 and 2011, and 1 deployment to Afghanistan in 2013. He earned 2 Bronze Stars, one for actions during the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, another for leadership during a convoy ambush in Kandahar province in 2013. He received a Purple Heart after an IED attack in 2007 left him with shrapnel wounds to his left leg and temporary hearing loss in his right ear. After retiring in 2015, he earned a master's degree in social work from UCLA and became a veteran services counselor at the West Los Angeles VA Medical Center, where he had worked for 7 years at the time of the incident. He was a deacon at First Baptist Church of South Los Angeles, a coach for the Crenshaw Youth Football League, and a member of American Legion Post 5118. He had never been arrested. He had never been detained. He carried his military ID everywhere. Derek Morrison had been with Immigration and Customs Enforcement for 9 years at the time of the incident. He joined ICE in 2015 after 4 years as a patrol officer with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, a tenure marked by 7 use-of-force complaints and a pattern his supervisors described as showing potential bias indicators that require continued monitoring. That monitoring never resulted in discipline. Discovery in the subsequent lawsuit would reveal that between 2019 and 2024, Morrison conducted 847 immigration stops, 412 in predominantly black neighborhoods, despite those areas having among the lowest undocumented populations in the region. Of those 847 stops, 631 resulted in no arrest, a 75% rate of stopping people who were citizens, lawful residents, or valid visa holders. His complaint file contained 23 separate allegations of racial profiling or excessive force. None had resulted in meaningful discipline. He was partnered that morning with Agent Christina Reeves, a 3-year ICE employee who would later testify she had concerns about Morrison's approach but felt unable to contradict a senior agent in the field. The encounter began at 6:23 a.m. Washington had stopped for gas and coffee before his 7:30 shift at the VA. He was wearing a gray UCLA jacket, blue jeans, work boots, and a black veteran's cap. His VA employee badge hung from a lanyard around his neck. He paid for his gas and coffee, exchanged pleasantries with cashier Aaliyah Carter, who knew him by sight, and walked back to his car. He set his coffee on the roof while fishing for his keys and was reaching for the door when a white Dodge Charger with tinted windows pulled into the lot and stopped directly behind his SUV, blocking him in. Morrison exited the driver's side. Reeves exited the passenger side. Neither was in uniform. Morrison approached with his hand on his holstered weapon. The Shell station's cameras captured what happened next. Morrison approached to within 3 feet of Washington. Immigration enforcement. Need to see your documents. Washington turned, hands visible. I'm an American veteran. 22 years Army. Morrison did not acknowledge the statement. I didn't ask about the Army. Documents. Washington said, my wallet's right here. Let me show you. And began to reach toward his back pocket. Morrison drew his service weapon and leveled it at Washington's chest. Hands where I can see them. Don't move. Washington froze, hands raised to shoulder height, his VA badge clearly visible on the lanyard around his neck. Morrison removed Washington's wallet from his back pocket, opened it, and found inside a California driver's license, a military ID card identifying Washington as a retired master sergeant, and a VA employee ID card. He looked at all 3 cards. He put the wallet on the roof next to the coffee. He said, these don't prove citizenship. Where are your immigration documents? Washington said, I was born here. In Los Angeles, at King Hospital, 4 miles from where we're standing. Morrison said, I need documentation of that. Washington said, my military ID is documentation. I served 22 years. You can't do that without being a citizen. Morrison grabbed Washington's wrist, pulled his arm behind his back, and cuffed him. You're being detained for failure to provide documentation of lawful presence. Inside the station, Aaliyah Carter watched through the window. She recognized Washington. He stopped there twice a week. She saw the gun. She started recording and called a number every employee knew, Terrence Williams. Ghost, there's a cop or something with a gun on Mr. Harold. The veteran. Something's wrong. Williams was a block and a half away. I'm coming. Williams was 34 years old, a documented member of the Rollin 60s neighborhood Crips, and the de facto community liaison between the gang and local businesses, an arrangement that had evolved over years into something resembling an informal neighborhood watch. By the time Williams arrived, Washington was handcuffed on the curb beside his own car, his veteran's cap knocked off and lying in a puddle of spilled coffee. Morrison had radioed for backup. Reeves stood 6 feet away, her body language suggesting profound discomfort. A crowd had gathered, customers, employees from the tire shop next door, a woman walking her dog. Several were recording on phones. One man, Deshaun Williams, 26, was shouting at Morrison. "That's Mr. Harold, man. He coaches my little brother. He a veteran. What are you doing?" Morrison ignored him. Terrence Williams's black Cadillac Escalade pulled into the lot. He parked perpendicular to Morrison's Charger, blocking any exit. Williams stepped out, 6 feet 2 inches, 220 pounds, wearing a white t-shirt and black jeans, tattoos visible on both forearms, and climbing up the left side of his neck. He walked directly toward Morrison with a calm that the security footage would later capture in perfect detail. The plaintiff's attorney would call it the most controlled display of courage in a situation that could have turned fatal. Williams stopped 10 feet away, hands visible, held slightly out from his sides. That man is a decorated veteran. He served this country. I know who he is. Everyone here knows who he is. You need to uncuff him. Morrison turned, hand going to his weapon. Back up. This is federal business. Williams did not back up. I'm not moving, and I'm not letting you take him. You want to arrest me? Do it. But you're not taking that man anywhere until someone with authority gets here and sees what you're doing to a veteran. Morrison said, interference with a federal agent is a felony. Williams said, then charge me. But I know the law too. You need probable cause. You have a man with a military ID, a VA badge, and a California license, and you've got him in cuffs. That's not probable cause. That's profiling. Here's where I have to ask. When you see a black man in handcuffs, a gun in a federal agent's hand, and documented evidence that every piece of identification was being ignored, who should be held accountable? The agent? The agency? The system that trained him? Let me know in the comments what real accountability looks like. The standoff lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Williams did not move. Morrison did not draw. The crowd continued to record. Aaliyah Carter was on the phone with 911 reporting a federal agent pointing a gun at a veteran for no reason. What broke the standoff was the arrival of LAPD, 2 squad cars responding to Aaliyah's call. The first officer on scene was Sergeant Marcus Chen, a 14-year veteran of the LAPD Southwest Division who had grown up in the neighborhood, who had coached alongside Washington in the Youth Football League, and who recognized him immediately. Chen approached Morrison with his hands visible. Agent, I know this man. He's Harold Washington. He's a retired Army Master Sergeant. He works at the VA. Morrison said, I'm conducting an immigration stop. Chen said, based on what? I've known him for 10 years. He was born here. Morrison said, I don't take orders from LAPD. Chen said, you're not taking anyone anywhere until we sort this out. Right now you have a decorated veteran in handcuffs in front of a crowd with cameras. That's your call, but I'd think hard about how this looks. For 23 seconds, no one spoke. Then Morrison uncuffed Washington. He did not apologize. He said, we'll be in touch, got in his vehicle with Reeves, and drove away. Ghost Williams picked up Washington's cap from the puddle, shook off the coffee, and handed it back to him. You good, Mr. Harold? Washington took the cap. He didn't answer. Washington sat in his car for 40 minutes afterward, hands shaking too badly to drive. Sergeant Chen stayed with him. Ghost Williams stayed with him. That afternoon, he called a lawyer. Aaliyah's recording was already circulating on Instagram, 47,000 views by noon. By evening, local news. By morning, national. The lawsuit was filed April 2nd, 2024, in the United States District Court for the Central District of California. Harold Washington was represented by Mariana Espinoza of the Civil Rights Law Group, a former assistant U.S. attorney who had spent 8 years prosecuting federal civil rights cases. The complaint alleged Fourth Amendment violations, Fifth Amendment due process violations, and raised Bivens and Federal Tort Claims Act claims. It sought $15 million, $5 million compensatory, $10 million punitive. Discovery proved devastating. Morrison's personnel file showed 23 prior complaints, 17 alleging racial profiling, 4 alleging excessive force, 2 alleging failure to verify status before detention. None resulted in discipline beyond verbal counseling. His stop data showed 62% of stops were of black individuals, despite black residents comprising less than 8% of the undocumented population in his areas. Internal emails showed his supervisor noted concerns about targeting patterns in a 2021 performance review, but declined formal action because Morrison's stop numbers met departmental metrics. The government's own documents showed a system that incentivized volume over accuracy, that counted stops rather than outcomes. The deposition of Agent Morrison on September 14, 2024, would be quoted in news coverage and congressional testimony. Attorney Espinoza methodically dismantled his justification. What was the basis for your belief that Mr. Washington was subject to immigration enforcement? His appearance and location. What about his appearance? He appeared to be of an ethnicity that I associate with potential immigration violations. Mr. Washington is black. Are you suggesting being black is a basis for an immigration stop? I'm not saying that. When you examined his military ID showing 22 years of service and the rank of Master Sergeant, what did you conclude? I noted the document. Did you believe it was fraudulent? I didn't have reason to believe it was authentic. Did you call the Department of Defense to verify? No. Did you call the VA, the employer listed on the badge around his neck? No. Did you run his California driver's license through any database? No. For 47 minutes you detained a man with a military ID, a VA badge, and a California license, and your investigation consisted of waiting? I was assessing the situation. What would have constituted sufficient proof of citizenship? A passport, a birth certificate. Do you carry your birth certificate when you get gas in the morning, Agent Morrison? That's not relevant. Agent Reeves's deposition was equally damaging. She testified she recognized relatively quickly that Washington was likely a citizen. When asked why she didn't intervene, Agent Morrison was senior. I deferred to his judgment. When asked if his judgment was correct, she paused 11 seconds, timed on the record, before saying, "I had concerns I didn't voice at the time." The government's own agent, admitting she watched what she believed was a mistake unfold and said nothing. Harold Washington's testimony came October 3rd. "I served this country for 22 years, he said. "I saw friends die. I took shrapnel in my leg. I have hearing damage from an IED. I did that because I believed in what this country is supposed to be. And then I come home, and I'm getting coffee before work, wearing a cap that says veteran, with my VA badge around my neck, and a federal agent puts a gun in my face and tells me I have to prove I belong here. I'm 54 years old. I was born 4 miles from that gas station. My family has been in this city since 1947, and none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was what I look like. That's a particular kind of hurt that doesn't go away. I wake up at night thinking about it. I see a plain car now, and my heart rate spikes. I did everything right. I identified myself, I stayed calm, I complied, and it didn't matter. And I keep thinking about every other black man, every other black veteran, every other person who looks like me, who gets stopped and doesn't have witnesses, doesn't have cameras, doesn't have Ghost Williams stepping out of that store. What happens to them?" Settlement negotiations began in November 2024. The government's risk assessment rated adverse verdict probability at 75% or higher, given the video evidence and Morrison's deposition testimony. A settlement was reached December 11, 2024. $4.2 million, $2.5 million compensatory for emotional distress, PTSD treatment, and reputational harm, and $1.7 million punitive. The agreement was signed December 18, 2024. Payment was processed December 23, 2024. Washington received the funds December 28, 2024, all within the same calendar year. A timeline his attorney described as unusually swift, reflecting the government's recognition that this case was indefensible. Agent Morrison was terminated January 3, 2025, citing conduct unbecoming a federal agent, failure to follow proper verification procedures, and a documented pattern of enforcement actions that cannot be justified by legitimate immigration priorities. Agent Reeves was suspended 30 days and reassigned pending retraining. 3 supervisors received formal reprimands for failing to act on prior complaints. The LA field office was placed under a 3-year monitoring agreement requiring quarterly audits of stop data with racial breakdowns. In February 2025, Representative Maxine Waters introduced a resolution calling for congressional hearings on ICE enforcement in predominantly black neighborhoods. It passed 287 to 143 with bipartisan support. Harold Washington was invited to testify. So was Terrence Williams. Williams's testimony was streamed live on C-SPAN and viewed over 4 million times. "I've done things I'm not proud of," he said. "I've made choices that hurt my community. But that morning, I saw a veteran, a man I'd seen around the neighborhood my whole life, a man who coaches kids, who helps people, being treated like a criminal by someone who didn't care who he was. And I knew right then that whatever happens to me, whatever I've done, I couldn't let that stand. That man served. He served all of us, even me. So I did the only thing I could do. I stood between him and that gun, and I said no." Harold Washington used his settlement to establish the Washington Veterans Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit providing free legal representation to veterans experiencing civil rights violations. He donated $100,000 to the Crenshaw Youth Football League. He established a scholarship at Crenshaw High for graduating seniors entering military or veteran services careers. He paid off his sister's mortgage, the same house on West 59th Street where 3 generations of Washingtons had lived since 1965. He continued his work at the VA, though he transferred to the Community Outreach Office where he felt more comfortable. And he continued stopping at that same Shell station where Aaliyah Carter still worked the early shift, and where a small plaque was installed near Pump 3. In recognition of Harold Washington, Master Sergeant, retired, whose dignity and service to this nation could not be diminished by those who failed to see it. What started as a routine stop for gas on a March morning became a federal lawsuit, a $4.2 million settlement, a congressional hearing, and a national conversation about who gets treated as American and who has to prove it. Harold Washington did everything right that morning. He identified himself, he cooperated, he remained calm, and still ended up in handcuffs on a curb with his veteran's cap in a puddle because an agent with a badge and a gun decided that none of that mattered as much as what Harold Washington looked like. The cameras saw everything, the witnesses saw everything, the courts saw everything, and still, when the settlement check cleared and the agent was fired and the hearing convened, Harold Washington knew that the check didn't undo the 47 minutes. The termination didn't erase the fear. The hearing didn't change the fact that somewhere in South Los Angeles right now, another veteran, another citizen, another person who looks like Harold Washington is wondering if their credentials will be enough, if their service will be enough, if they will be enough. That's the wound that no settlement can heal. That's the question that no policy can answer. Harold Washington received $4.2 million for 47 minutes of humiliation. That's $89,361 per minute. And it still wasn't enough. If stories like this matter to you, stories of injustice exposed, of accountability demanded, of systems confronted, then subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We cover cases like Harold Washington's every week. Veterans, professionals, citizens targeted by the systems that are supposed to protect them, who fought back through the courts and won. Your subscription supports this work. Your comments drive the algorithm. Your shares spread the truth. In a world that often looks away, watching is the first step toward change.